Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Steve Zimmermann. How you doing, Steve?
Good. How are you doing, Daniel?
Doing good, thanks. Steve, it's been a while. About what, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago, I think I was on your podcast, on the Range Minded
Yeah,
podcast, and
probably. Yeah, it's been
um,
it's been a little bit.
we hung out on Instagram for a little bit and did an Instagram live and caught
Instagram
up
homies.
afterwards. Yeah. So, um, give everybody just a little background about yourself. We're kind of going to do things a little bit different this week. We've been kind of off topic with last week's episode, and we're just going to kind of continue with it because there's still some good value there that we can hit some things and have some conversations from a different angle. So tell us about yourself.
So, like I said, my name's Steve Zimmermann. I've probably got too many uh, social media accounts. I also just started another one because why not?
Why
So
not?
on Instagram, I'm just the Steve Zimmermann. I used to be in Practical Tactical, and I'll get into why. And then I started when I just got a Forerunner, so I started a stupid Instagram on a Forerunner account. We can talk about those later. Um, I grew up super weird, I guess. So I grew up in little southeast Idaho, a little town between Rigby and Ryrie. The area was called Clark. Uh, it's super small. Grew up on 26 acres. I didn't have money growing up. Definitely no white privilege in our house. Um, Homeschooled, so that's another weird side of me. So uh, I kind of have it from a lot of sides. So I'm Mormon, I guess you could call me a Mormon, homeschooled and poor in growing up in a really poor place. And so yeah, I don't necessarily fit the mold that some people might expect. But honestly, I don't think I'm weird. Like I don't fit the weird homeschool vibe. Uh, Hung out a lot of high school basketball games, went to dances, had a lot of friends, owned a couple businesses. So I don't think I'm too backwards, I guess that way.
Yeah.
Um, love firearms. That's you mentioned my podcast, Range Minded Podcast. It's all my kids are now banging on the piano. That's awesome.
Hey,
Uh, I'm a firearms enthusiast. I'm an educator when it comes to firearms. Big into safety. So between that and like 3 different other jobs in my life, I stay pretty busy.
hey, yeah. So it's those of you that don't know Steve, it's like his Instagram is a steady flow of like, wait, you're doing something else now? Like, what's this? So
Pretty much.
like, wait,
Yeah, it
you
went
another
from
another business?
because I'm a carpenter by trade, right? So I do a lot of interior finishes, and I guess I'm good at it. I'm not gonna say I'm the best at it. I'm pretty good at it. I try not to be boastful about it. So I have an Instagram for that, and a lot of my feed is about building things, right? Um, and then the firearms thing, and then I just helped start up a plastics company. So now I'm doing thermoforming and rotomolding eventually. Um, and then what else? Oh yeah, just it, one thing after another, dude. I'm sure something else will pop up.
Yeah, I mean, you got to fill your time, so it's important. Um,
I
so
got a few minutes in the morning.
what's that?
I says I have a few minutes in the morning. I could probably fill it with something.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe take up like bonsai or something or
Really, the true bonsai is oneself, right?
yes, exactly.
You're drinking. I'm gonna have something to drink too.
Yeah,
So
I tend to drink a lot of tea when I do these because I talk all day, so my voice goes out and it's a fun time. Um,
I prefer ginger beers.
hey, that works too. So we'd kind of talked earlier about like we were kind of discussing things with mental health
Mm-hmm.
and kind of trying to figure out how we were going to approach this episode. And you brought up some interesting things like the last episode we had Nick Hoffer on, and you know Nick really well,
Yep.
and he shared just a great like just great nuggets about like how to cope with the loss of a loved one and how he's actively doing it right now with the loss of his father. And
That's a
so
lot of work.
yeah, and as you and I were talking, that kind of came up. and loss and grieving. And so kind of on that same subject, um, you lost your father earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
A while back, you lost your sister. And how did you cope with that? Because a lot of people, like, I never dealt with the loss of my father right away. I thought I did. Like, I was there, I was present when he passed, and it was a really big emotional thing. My brother and my mom were there, like the whole family was there, right?
Yeah.
So we're super grateful for that. But I didn't really deal with it right away. And I thought that I had. And it wasn't until everything else in life had caught up. And I kind of hit that morning where I just woke up and I was like, oh crap, I'm broke. And like full blown, like, this is not normal me. And discovered I had PTSD and
Avalanche
started
of
that
stuff.
dormant. Yeah. Yeah. And it's that uncontrolled like eruption, right? Um, it wasn't until then that I really realized that amongst all these other things that I was dealing with, I also had the loss of my father that I had never really dealt with and like fully processed. I was just like very strong at the time that like, well, he passed away, like he's moved on to a better place, he's with his family, like, it's all good. Um, what was that like for you? How did that transpire?
So, first of all, my dad is my hero. Um, his long backstory. We don't have time to get into his real history. He's an immigrant. He immigrated to the United States when he was 11 from Germany. He was born right at the end of World War II with birth defects. Um, his real dad wanted to just have him, offed, I guess was better like a term, because he had birth defects. My real grandfather was still sympathetic to the party, and it was just a crazy family dynamic. So my
Mm-hmm.
dad has been through so much, just the first few years of his life. He is my hero. If my dad can get through everything he grew up with, then there's nothing I can't get through. I'm going to preface with that. So my dad, he had suffered a mild stroke, and it was kind of scary. We were down there a couple days later to get this phone call. My mom didn't know what to do. I told her, well, get him to the hospital. That's the first thing you need to do. And everything was fine. Like a couple days later, everything was cool. Like he was back to normal. And then like it was probably 3 or 4 days after that, he had a massive, massive stroke. And that was hard, right? That was super tough to see. My dad was always very independent. He didn't like other people doing things for him.
Mm-hmm.
He could do it.
Yep.
And so that stroke took him down pretty hard. We took him down to University Hospital. He spent probably a month, maybe a month and a half down at University of Utah. In that time frame, he suffered like 5 more pretty massive strokes. He had a massive heart attack while he was in the hospital, and it was tough to see him. Um, sorry, I might get a little emotional.
That's
Uh,
all good.
he that month and a half down there at university, they pretty much said, "Hey, there's nothing that we can do here for him, so you might as well not spend a ton of money here. Just take him home." So made the arrangements, brought him home, and it was almost a year that he was just confined to a bed. And that was really, really hard to see. It was hard to tell him that he'd want to get up and garden, or he loved to work on his roses and stuff. He'd love to be outside, and it was really hard to tell him that, Dad, you can't get out of bed, because he couldn't. He had no power in his legs anymore. So I think seeing him like that, like I kind of accepted that, the sooner or later it's going to happen, right? So some of the grieving was already done that first year, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes any sense whatsoever. Not that it made it easier by any means, but I'd already come to terms with, this is the last chapter, and I just need to enjoy the time that I had
Mm-hmm.
with him.
Absolutely.
So we did. We were down there almost, every weekend. They live down in Bancroft. I don't, where Bancroft is,
Yep.
probably. And so that was like 2 hours away from where I'm at. So we drive down there, pretty much spend all day Saturday with him, and then drive home. I spent a lot of time down at University Hospital with him, and luckily because of my occupation and because I have a lot of influence over my own schedule. I was able to spend a lot of time with him,
Mm.
um, and just accepting, that nature is going to take its course.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way I thought, oh, I'm dealing with this now. It's not a big deal. Um, when my sister called, because she was down there too. She lives in Ogden, but she came up and spent a lot of time helping. She's knowledgeable in the medical field, and so she's able to help a lot. And her time, or anyway, she called me and let me know that my dad uh, left mortality.
Mm.
That was really really hard. And I made a quick trip down there. Probably should have got a ticket, but luckily there's no cops that day on the highway. I got down there pretty quick, but safely. I wasn't erratic by any means. And yeah, and it wasn't really till I spoke at his funeral, I guess, that reality set in. That I've sorry that I wouldn't get a hug from him, or I wouldn't hear him call me bud. So that was tough. That was tough. Uh, and just like anybody, and I don't care who you are or how tough you are, you're gonna miss him. You're
Mm.
gonna think about calling him. And then just you get that little reminder that's you won't get to talk to him here. You gotta wait.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, there's still times I miss him a bunch, and which is normal, right?
Mm.
And I think it's important that we miss him so we don't forget him. If we didn't miss him, then there'd probably be a bigger issue. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's healthy as
Yeah.
much as it sucks. It's healthy.
It is. And I think as time goes on, it's a lot of those firsts. Like
Yeah,
the first Christmas, the first birthday, the first whatever significant event that it was,
yeah,
makes it kind of hard.
yeah.
And
Like I remember walking in my mom's house. Um, we had him cremated, so walking into my mom's house, and the first thing is, hey, where's dad? Oh yeah, he's not here.
yeah,
So it's tough, but I don't know. As long as I keep him in my heart, and no, I do believe I'll see him again. So that definitely gives me hope. So
yeah. So how have you dealt with that? What are some ways that you've coped with that loss and been able to move forward?
so the unhealthy way that I cope is I work a lot, and that isn't really healthy. I don't think. Um, but I still think like my faith in believing that I'll see him again. I think that's really really what helps me the most. Um, I'll tell you one. Well, this I don't know if you want to hear this experience or not. I'll tell it.
Yeah, go for it.
Maybe it'll help somebody. Uh, my mom sold the house in Bancroft, and she now lives in Ogden. And we helping her move a few weeks ago, and she still has my dad's ashes, which some people think like, oh, that's pretty gross or whatever.
My
I'm
mom still has
indifferent.
my dad's.
I'm indifferent. Like it doesn't bother me. Uh, but it was really weird. So I when we were moving her into her place in Ogden, I picked up the urn and I was carrying my dad into her house, and it was almost like he'd put his arms around me again. So I think that and some other really close experiences, I really feel like that they're not that far away from us.
Mhm.
I think I think they can be there to comfort us when we need it, and I
Absolutely.
needed it that day. So
Yeah.
I think that gives me some hope and some comfort.
Yeah, and I think that so often like kind of people look might At least I've always felt like some people kind of look at that like as a crazy thing. But I think if you're connected to deity, no matter what religion that happens to be, whatever
Yeah.
your religion of choice is, that's fine. But if you're connected to that deity, to any sort of spiritual type thing, energy, any of those things, I think that you can feel that presence and connection when you do need it. And um it's a really interesting experience when it
It it
happens.
it was so surreal. Like it was too real for me to believe that I made it up myself.
Hmm.
And the feeling was unmockable, unpretendable. I don't know how to put it. It
Yeah,
was just too real to know that my mind was creating something.
yeah,
So I do feel like he gave me a hug that day.
nice. It's awesome. Um, so have you been back down to visit your mom since she moved south then?
Yeah, I was actually down there just on Monday for Memorial
For
Day.
Memorial
Went
Day?
down there, took my mom to dinner, picked up my brother, and we ate at some fancy Japanese restaurant in Salt Lake. And
Nice.
so, not a lot of time, like not as much time as we should have had with her. I had to be to work on Tuesday, so we just hurried there and back.
Yeah. I know for me, like I mean, my at the time when my dad passed, my both my parents were living in California. I was here in Utah. And so I had only went back to the house after he passed, and it's the house that I grew up in, maybe I think two more times. And one of
Yeah,
those times was when my brother and I and our families came back for his funeral, um, which was nice because it wasn't like a traditional. It was just like everybody got together and had lunch and told stories,
yeah,
and so it was pretty awesome. But the second time I came back, my mom had sold the house and she was moving to Utah, and I think that kind of that separation of that house that you grew up in with all those
yeah,
memories, I actually think that helped with some of that healing. And it's not that, I mean, like in my mom's house, like there's still pictures of my dad, there's still all the same
yeah,
furniture and all those things, but it's in a different place. And so like I have no memory of my father in my mom's house because
yeah.
he never lived
Yeah,
here,
I could see
right?
how that would be a benefit. Yeah,
So it's kind of interesting to see those things that remind me of him, but that memory happened somewhere else. And I
yeah,
think that kind of helped with that process too. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes for you moving forward as well.
yeah. The worst part about that, for me, anyways, is my mom hasn't been alone in like 50 something years.
Yeah.
They got married pretty young, and so that makes me a little nervous. Just my sister, the one that helped a lot, that she just lives 5 minutes away, so that's good.
Yeah.
We were 2 hours when she lived in Bancroft. We were almost 2 hours away, and that was too far. Like if something happened, it was just too far.
Yeah.
And
Well, and even in Bancroft, you're a ways from
yeah,
all the
well, the closest
services that you
hospital
need.
is Soda Springs. And don't get me wrong, like I don't know if you have anybody from Bancroft or from that area that listens or watches, but I love it down there. Like it is awesome between lava and all the way down to Montpelier. Honestly, I
Yeah.
love that whole area. So I'm not like dissing the community or anything by any means, but it's just so small and rural. There's not a lot of opportunities for, excuse me, good health care or time to get places. It just
Mhm.
is a long ways to get anything. So
Yeah, it's kind of it's the sacrifice that we make to live in a rural area.
yeah,
And
and
and and for a lot of the places that I've lived that are super rural, like that was the sacrifice. You don't have the easy access to shopping and healthcare and all those things, but you have this like tight-knit community
yeah,
and you're out in the open. It's like
I
you're
I
not
honestly love
surrounded by buildings. You have this
I,
open
I love it.
space. Yeah. So it's a trade-off. It's worth it. I think it's harder when
Yeah,
you get older if you really need the health care, but
yeah, that's true. Driving through Salt Lake, I hate Salt Lake with a passion. I hate it down there. I drove to Los Angeles. Well, it's been a while. I haven't been to Los Angeles for a while, but I've got some relatives in Northern California, so I drove to Redding a couple times. I
Mhm.
hate Redding with a passion. It's
That's right. I
super
forgot you
super
had
pretty,
family in
but it
Redding.
is awful up there. Like too many people, and
I haven't
honestly, like
been,
Idaho Falls is getting the same way.
yeah, I haven't been to Redding in so long. And I hear it's changed quite a bit. It's
Yeah,
probably
it has,
been, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years since I've driven through there at
and I think
least.
it's been longer since I've been there even. But it was uh, too many people. Not quite the political affiliations that I normally lean towards. It was
Yeah,
just it was a mess.
yeah. So how has the loss and everything gone with the rest of your family? Has everybody coped with it really well or difficulties?
As far as I can tell, I I think so. We have a pretty good family. We haven't been as close as we used to be. When
Mm,
we were all younger. I'm the youngest of five kids. We were all pretty close, so I think that kind of helps. My brother, he's a few years older than me. His wife passed away. Well, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And when he was married, she didn't really get along with the family too much, so we didn't see him for a long, long time. So his dynamic is pretty interesting, I think, because he's trying to repair or reclaim some lost time with the family, and then
mm,
have my dad pass away. I think that was probably really hard on him
mm,
because he missed out on probably 10 years of uh, of family life, and so it's probably the hardest on him. And I feel kind of bad because he's uh he's pretty smart, and so he's a little different. I don't how sometimes smart people are a little bit more aloof and just kind of
mm.
awkward sometimes. That's my brother. He's pretty damn intelligent and loves computers, and so he's he's just trying to reclaim that time I think that he's lost. And so having him closer to my mom, he lives in South Salt Lake, I think that's going to help a ton too, because he can visit a lot more often.
Yeah.
And so, but other than that, I mean, you mentioned my sister passing away. That was probably harder. Well, nothing's like losing a parent, but that was still really tough. And that I guess uh, maybe gave us an idea of what it was going to be like to lose our dad, I guess.
Mm.
But that was hard. That was pretty tough. I honestly think I repressed that more than I should. Um, I can't even remember like what day she died. Honestly, like the day of the year.
Yeah.
Uh, but that was super tough. She died in a pretty terrible accident. They used to go on Sunday hikes as a family, and they lived in Farmington, and they were climbing up. I can't remember what canyon it was, up one of the mountains on the west side or east side of Farmington there, and there's this cascade. Like I know like I've been on the trail. I don't know the name of the canyon. I could point it out. But
Mm.
there's this cascade. You come across this trail, and there's this cascade that overlooks this kind of rocky waterfall. But it's kind of precarious to get. You have to kind of straddle a big rock that goes over this cascade. Anyway, she lost her grip, and and she fell. And my brother-in-law went to catch her, and he fell down there with her, and he
Jeez.
just cradled her the whole way down. And and she was she was just too battered. He was really beat up too. But she hit her head just right, I guess, and that was really hard because my nephew was there, and her whole family was there, like her son and stepkids and my brother-in-law, they were all there, so it was pretty tough on them. But my sister and I were really really close. When we were younger, we all had the same friends. We'd hang out in a huge friend group and do a lot of stuff together. So that was really really hard to let her go.
Yeah.
Like I say, I think I kind of repressed that more than I should. It's been a long time since I've been to her grave. Actually, I probably should get down there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like it's one of those things. I mean, I think everybody deals with the loss in their own time and in their own way.
Yeah,
But I think it's important not to repress things as well. And like whatever that release is, I mean it could be talking to your friend over lunch, it could be
yeah,
talking to a loved one, it could be a therapist, it could be any number of things that are available.
yeah.
Um, but I just think it
And
is
I think it's
important
important
to,
for people to understand too, like especially for dudes. Like, I guess I don't know if I consider myself an alpha male, but I guess maybe I am. And well, maybe for men in general, like we don't like to share our feelings, or we don't like to be emotional about things, even if we're alone. Sometimes we just it's it's not manly, right?
yep.
I think in general that's really unfair for who we are, because we can't just keep putting things in a backpack and thinking that backpack's going to hold up. Sooner or
Yeah,
later something's got to give.
it's not going to get any lighter, and the more you carry, the more you carry.
Yeah,
And I think societally, men in general, there's this stigma about not speaking up and not talking about these things.
yeah,
Um, which I find fascinating when our current culture in this country is talking about how masculinity is toxic and it's bad.
yeah,
Yet it's still not okay as a man to be emotional and vulnerable. But really, I actually would have to say that there is nothing more empowering as a man and more masculine as a man to be openly vulnerable and be willing to talk about those things.
yeah.
Um, I've noticed with other men, like when men do have a bond with other men, like that, the brotherhood, right? And they feel like they can share that. That's where it really happens, and where men can actually be vulnerable and truthful because they know that they can trust each other, and that
Yeah.
everything is secure and like they're safe in their little zone with those other guys. And men are so much different than women, where women will just become like friends over an outfit that the other one has that they like, where men, like some of the closest bonds I've made with other men were like we went and sweat together, like
Yeah.
went and did man stuff, went and like worked
Yeah.
out, went and went and did, you know, some project together, working on, you know, a car or a house or something. And that's how men
Or
bond.
maybe you got in a fight with each
Or
other.
maybe got in a fight. Yeah. Which I always think is interesting because if women get in fights with each other, they hate each other for life, it seems like, where
Yeah.
men will kick the living snot out of each other, and then 20 minutes later or a week later they're hanging out. Because
Yeah.
you just deal with it, and then you move on with life. But I think it's important for men to find that space where they can talk, because to say that we're not allowed to express emotion,
That's
we're not
super
allowed to do those
unfair.
things,
Like,
it's not healthy.
yeah.
And I think that's why we have such a problem with increased suicide rates in men in this country.
Yeah.
And we're not doing culture a favor. I mean, you can say masculinity is toxic all you want, but you need both feminine and masculine. You need men
Yeah.
and women to make the world work. And
Yeah.
and they
I
both have
wish,
unique traits that are important.
yeah, 100%. I really wish that, the next generation of men, like I really like Jordan Peterson. I don't know
Mm,
if you follow Jordan or not, but like he
yeah.
talks about being dangerous, being able to be violent and dangerous. Not not always that way, but just
Mm,
having the potential to be that way.
yeah.
Um, I think it's important, but I think it's important to also demonstrate how controlling that is what is really manly, right?
Mm,
Being able to show affection to your spouse or your children in the way that they need or whatever, and being emotional when you need to be, right? Not violent emotional, but caring emotional.
mm.
it is really lacking in society. I think you're right, and I think that probably has a lot to do with why we're seeing a lot of these young men act out in weird ways, is because
Absolutely.
they don't know how to.
Yeah, they don't know how to act. They don't know how to um they don't know how to cope with it.
Yeah,
And because they don't know how to cope with it, it's detrimental. And I think that's one of the things, like we need to just be willing to cope with it, man up and talk about it
yeah,
and deal with those things. And I'm even like, I find it interesting, there's a lot of this like sisterhood stuff, but like I think we need more brotherhood. And there is some groups out there that are doing that. But I think just in general, there's strength um in men building those groups amongst men. And a
yeah. I
lot
mean,
of
we're
it's mental strength.
yeah, 100%. Uh, as much as we don't want to admit it, we are still social creatures. Even if we're homebodies or reclusive or whatever, we're still a social creature, and we
Mm.
need interaction from our peers. We need it not only to deal with stress in a different way, but we have to do it to be able to know how to cope with
Yeah.
society. Because if we don't talk to anybody, we can't deal with anything. It's almost like an old person trying to get on social media. If they don't know how to
Yeah.
do it, they don't know how to communicate. But once they're exposed to it, they can.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real injustice if I think it'd be cool to set up some kind of a man's group or something to just go on a hike or go shooting or whatever, just to unwind. That's how I like to unwind is I
Yeah.
like to throw some lead down range. That's therapy for me.
Yeah. And I think most men can unite in that.
Yeah.
And it is like, it is a good therapeutic thing. And it's actually, it's funny because you look at the culture of what like they define like masculine, and like men are often equated as like these like Neanderthal, like
Yeah.
clubbing stuff, and clubbing women, dragging them into a cave sort of thing, right? But just the act of shooting, like there's this precision element that is such a delicate thing that you would almost think that it's not manly. Like I've always like I've been fortunate enough to learn shooting sports from some pretty remarkable people. My father was a great teacher,
Yeah.
and then just the people that I met along the way, the people that I grew up with and friends that I'd go and shoot with in school. And um, but I've always been astounded at when women shoot, they have this like level of finesse, and I think it's because they're just like the gentle creature where it's
There's so much more intuitive, honestly.
yeah.
Like
So it's
like dudes are like speed shooters, like clearing rooms, making messes, just pounce through there. And then lady shooters are like, oh, I'm gonna shoot 15 rounds through a dime size hole.
yeah, yeah, and that's where like the art of shooting like really comes in, that you're like, man, it does, like it is therapeutic, and it like men can get together around guns, almost all of
Yeah.
them. It's like guns and cars, right? Uh, but the act of actually shooting, there's this finesse that you're doing, and like most women are not into shooting sports like men are, but they have this level of finesse with it that men, that's what men are doing. They're like, all right, I'm just gonna like, I don't want to jerk this trigger or I'm gonna mess my pattern up. I just gotta just nice little squeeze. Gotta breathe just right. And it's a weird focus that just, to me, it never equated to this. Like when you really get down to the science of shooting, it never
Yeah.
equated to this like that's not really like this big manly thing. There's so much
No.
delicateness to it.
Well, and to break a stereotype, I guess, like 80% of the newest gun owners are females.
Mhm.
And honestly, some of the best students I've ever had, well, pretty much all the best students I've ever had were women.
Yeah.
Just they're so easy to teach. They're dudes are just hard headed. They just want to. I'm gonna shoot holes in the paper. I don't care.
Yep.
Where women want to be so precise, and
Mm.
it's just so funny how the male and female mind work. It's just honestly that's why I became a firearms educator, is because I knew that the future of the Second Amendment is with women and children. That was the whole reason why I became an educator with that.
Yeah. And
So I wanted to
it
help.
is like, it's such a good, healthy like sport too. Like
It
it's
is, and I wish it didn't get such a negative stigma, you know. And all that negative stuff is just so many lies. It's unbelievable. It's just
yeah,
so frustrating.
yeah, and it is frustrating, and unfortunately because of that stigma, like ammo's expensive and everything else.
Well, there's lots of reasons why ammo's
There's lots of
expensive.
reason, yeah, but
That might be one
um,
of them, but also a major conflict in Ukraine is also a huge
yeah,
factor.
absolutely. But yeah, I've always enjoyed the shooting sport thing, and that's where I've actually had some of the best bonding with men. A buddy of mine, Randy, and I in high school, we would go out almost every day after school. And of course, like when when I was a teenager, you could buy a brick of 22 ammo, like
Oh
500
man,
rounds of 22 ammo. And if it was like $8, you're like, oh, it'll be on sale next week, and it'll be like
yeah.
six. You know,
I probably have a box of 22 here still with the $8 price tag on it.
yeah. And I mean, we'd go through a couple of those every afternoon,
Oh yeah.
and we'd just like drive down to the river bar. We'd find a soda can or a beer can and just chuck it out in front of us, and just take turns shooting at it and just pushing it further away. And
Do you know what's amazing is you never wanted to shoot each other.
no, never wanted to shoot each other. Never felt like I needed to go into a school and shoot anybody.
That's so weird.
But it was just this time, like we just sit there and BS, talk about guns that we wanted to buy, girls, cars, life, and just bonded. And
And look what you developed. Like you were working on your some neuro skills, right?
yeah,
Hand-eye coordination. Then you're talking about developing a friendship, your eyesight, aspirations for the future, making plans. Like
yeah,
all of those are positive things.
yeah. And we would go so much that people always wanted to go with us. So we would take other people, and we were fortunate enough to teach other people how to safely handle firearms and shoot,
Yeah.
and to learn the sport. There were some people that we never invited back because they were scary as shit.
Yeah.
and 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 we're like, yeah, don't,
And
yeah,
I could tell you stories. I
yeah,
have had guns pointed at me more than one.
yeah. I mean, like there was a time in particular that we had gotten out of the vehicle, and the guy had inadvertently touched the gun off, and he was holding it like kind of by his waist, and the butt of the rifle punched him right in the nuts. And and he's like, oh, and like drops his gun. He's on the ground. We just put our guns back in our gun bags and like put them back in the truck. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we're going. Well, we just
We're
got here. Like,
done.
yeah, we're done. Like, we're done
Good
here
on you.
today. We'll just chalk that one up to a bad incident. You're lucky nothing worse happened, and we're
Yeah.
done today.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen what happens when people get shot. Like yeah, it's best just to go home. If you start the shooting activity that way, yeah, just pack
Yep.
it up.
Yep. Just pack it up. And that was like one of the first things I was taught was like it's a life altering thing if you put it somewhere that you shouldn't. And so it changes things very much. And
Yeah.
it's important that people recognize that. But the bonding that happened in that
Yeah.
time is
Maybe what
remarkable
you're
and life
saying, what I'm
changing.
hearing is we might have to set up some kind of an event somewhere
That
where
yeah.
we have a campfire, maybe some camping, shooting, maybe some fly fishing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, gosh, it's been years since I've fly fished. I've
I just got a fly rod today. Somebody gave me.
nice.
I've never fly fished before. I was playing with somebody else's. I was casting and was actually doing all right casting. I'm like, man, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time.
Yeah. Yeah, the fly fishing's a good time. And I mean all those things. And I think that's like important to create those experiences too, that you can get out with other men and have those
Yeah.
experiences and have
It'd be
those
kind
those
of fun with
bonding
people.
things.
It'd be fun with people I don't even know. I think we
Oh,
should set
absolutely.
something up.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, between where you're at and I'm at, we've got a pretty good chunk of some BLM and Forest Service
Oh
land
yeah.
to go out and roam, and yeah, that'd be a good time.
Okay, you heard it here, folks.
Yeah,
Now you
that's
have to hold
right.
us
You
accountable.
heard it here. So, anybody who wants in, comment below, message us.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Need to get Nick out there too. He needs to unwind.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, Nick and I were talking about that last week about trying to get together soon too. And it's just life is a crazy thing. It catches up on us and we got to stay on
Yeah.
top of it.
Yeah, the last thing you want to be is like laying in your deathbed thinking, but nobody says, "Hey, I wish I would have worked one more day." Right?
Yeah.
It's never that. It's, man, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, or something, not working.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. Yeah, we should do that. I like that idea.
Me
Go do
too.
some outdoor stuff and just get a group of guys together who want to go play and
Yeah,
grow together and
I don't know if you ever heard of Spartan Mode, Adam Boyce.
yeah.
So he's a good friend of mine. We talked about doing some kind of an excursion where we talk about knife defense and gun defense and some survival stuff. I think, and that'd be so cool.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to charge for it. Like, we don't know what it would cost, like where we would do it, and
Yeah, that's kind of the hard thing. And like a lot of the stuff too, though, like I'm just interested in getting everybody together and like figuring out. I think you could probably narrow it down, like, budget yourself out and like let's just cover the expenses
yeah,
and get everybody out there.
I think it would be awesome. Just a couple nights camping, even, like, you don't even
Yeah.
have to go crazy.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just bring your own food or whatever, but yeah, I mean
Yeah,
there's so much that bonding that can happen in such a short period of time. And I think that growth's important.
yeah.
And just an opportunity, like I think men truly do bond in the outdoors.
Well, and I
Um,
think too, like, society wants to isolate people,
mhm.
right? Oh, Toby, that's one of my dogs. Uh, I think, society tries to put us in pigeonholes and tribalize us in different ways, and tell us that we're not good enough and we have to stand in a row or whatever. And
Mhm.
that's not the male spirit. That's not the American spirit.
Yeah,
I think there's so many skills that are being disappeared
absolutely.
that something needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I've even just like enjoyed like when I go camping with my kids and I have all girls, but like they're stoked to build a campfire
Yeah,
and to just like go through that process with them of getting everything ready and your tinder and then getting everything set up so you can be successful at it because it is a seemingly unimportant skill in modern
yeah,
society. But when you're out in the woods, it's I mean it's heat, it's the ability to cook,
yeah.
it's light in the darkness.
Keeps
And
the keeps the predators away.
yeah, I mean they'll never complain about having to go gather more wood so they can throw it on the fire. I
Yeah,
mean, man is like naturally curious with fire. I mean, that's how we evolved, you know. I mean,
yeah.
I can think
I
back to
still
my
like fire.
yeah, I can think back to my like fire prevention days, and you're like, yeah, I mean, it's being curious with fire. That's cool. Like everybody is. Like it's a healthy thing, but like when you play with it, it's bad. And like, well, I mean, it's just such a profound thing, and just like even just the solitude of sitting around a campfire with people is
Yeah,
such a good healthy thing.
it really does something to your soul. I don't know what it is. There's just something about it that just, man, it just relaxes me. Anyway, I don't know if it
Yeah.
does that to everybody, but it does. It just kind of pulls the negative out of you and puts it up in the smoke.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good thing, and I think that's interesting that we just like delved down this road of different therapeutic releases for stress, anxiety, all these things, right? Every little ailment, and none of them involve prescriptions, none of them
Yeah.
involved a therapist. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but there's just so many outlets and avenues out there that are available to just kind of reset yourself,
Yeah.
bring comfort to your soul.
I think I mentioned I just got a forerunner. It's an old one. Actually, it was my dad's, actually. And when I was a kid, I had a Scout, and I would go out in the desert and just drive for hours and hours
Mhm.
and hours. And that was my therapy.
Mhm.
And Sunday we went for a drive up into Island Park, and dude, that was so relaxing.
I
Even
bet.
not even doing anything. Like, we should have got out and gone for a hike or something, but just just going for a drive and like separating ourselves from, everything else we leave behind at the house. We just go for a drive, and everybody's chill, right? We just enjoy
Yeah.
the scenery. And
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
that is so much, man. I love doing that.
Yeah, there's so many things out there, and I think a lot of it is just like the taking your mind off of the
Yeah.
everyday norms by doing something different.
Well, it's like resting your eyes, right? You read too much, your eyes get strained, and then pretty
Mm,
soon you're not even getting any of the information that you're reading just because you're worried about falling asleep or whatever. It's the same thing. Once we take our focus off one thing, we're too hyper focused on it. If we're too
mm,
hyper focused on life or what's bringing us down, that's all we're ever going to see. So, break that focus off and do something else. Just relax. And
yeah,
it's okay to relax. Like, I know maybe some of these guys listening have a spouse that's always on their case about, getting the honeydew list done or whatever. You do have to keep your spouse happy. But at some point, it's good for everybody to just de-string that bow, and just relax. It's okay to
mm.
relax.
Yeah, and that's something that I've struggled with for years is that I feel like if I'm sitting down, I'm wasting a day.
I used to
And
feel that way.
and it's a such a weird thing. Like I can if I'm not careful, I'll make myself feel guilty for sleeping in on a Saturday.
Oh,
And so I
really?
really have to like purposefully tell myself the night before, like, I'm going to sleep in because my body needs the rest.
Yeah, I used to. I've worked a lot. So my first full time job was at 14. And that was in construction. Because I was homeschooled, like I could get all my homework done in the afternoons or evenings. So I had
Mm,
a full time job at 14, and from 14 till, and honestly 2010, like it was 5 days, 6 days a week, sun up to sundown, and I'm tired now. Like I can feel it now a lot.
yeah.
And but man, when you're young, it doesn't matter. You can just go and go and go and go.
Yep.
But maybe your coping mechanism is different too. Then too, I don't know when you're a kid, because I didn't let things bother me as much as I do now.
Yeah, and I think some of it too is just with age, like the more life experiences we have, because some of those things that are hard for us, like I even talk about with like PTSD that we can't unsee the things that we've
Yeah,
seen, those horrible things and the hard things, but we learn how to process them properly so that they don't weigh us down.
yeah,
Where if we just like pack them in and just push the emotion away, then it's very much a heavy burden that you're carrying around, and eventually it's going to come out. It
yeah,
eventually Pandora's box says, "Hey, enough's enough. I'm opening up." Whereas we process those things, they're lighter, they're easier to carry around. We even look at them as they're processed. I can look at things from a much different standpoint while I can still remember that it was a tragic thing that happened or a tragic event and it's still sad. I understand that what happened and it was dealt with in the best way possible and that the outcome, while wasn't necessarily desirable, there was a plan behind it.
yeah,
There was some reason, known or unknown, why it happened, and that we are able to cope with it that way. And I think as a kid, like, or as a teenager, when we deal with hard things and the things that don't bother us, I think it's kind of similar that at first you're just like, it's all this knowledge and this information. We're just chucking rocks in the backpack. And it is what it is. It's all new, right? And eventually, as we get older, all of a sudden we're like, man, this damn thing's getting heavy. And then it starts to bother us because we've taken on all these experiences, some good, some bad.
yeah,
But it's just taking that time to process them properly through whatever avenue it is. I mean, like, hobbies are so important for mental health. And if you're in a bad spot mental health wise, like any therapist will be like, well, what are you doing for self-care? And like for me and for most people, I find like a lot of them are like, wait, what? I don't have
yeah,
time for that. Well, what's a hobby that you enjoy? And you're like, I don't want to do anything. And so like at those times you really need to have that strengthened hobby or those things that are therapeutic to you and enjoyable
yeah.
to you. And so like I found myself like forcing myself to have a hobby even though I didn't want to, because it just seemed like another chore, another thing that I had to do.
Yeah.
But over time you're kind of like, okay, just did a little bit of it, just enough to say that I did. I'm like checking a box. And then eventually you kind of get out of that mode of checking a box and you're like, okay, no, this really is serving me. It's therapeutic and it's helping me to not feel weighed down.
And it's kind of funny because we kind of grow up in a society that's like that self care is that's inappropriate or whatever. You know, it's like
Mm,
don't do that. You know, just if you have a problem, you can go see a doctor. You can have a pill prescribed. It's that's just the way it is. And I think a lot of what we deal with, even emotionally, doesn't necessarily have to be resolved by medicine,
yeah.
right? Some of that can be resolved by, like you're saying, picking up a hobby or getting in nature, going for a hike, um, maybe fasting from the social medias. You know, just
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And and I think a lot can be corrected without without medication. But I think we just live in a society where that's just an answer, just an easy
It's
way to fix.
yeah, I mean it's the cure all, the quick fix. And
Yeah,
the fact of the matter is there is no such thing as a quick fix. While the medication certainly is the right option for some, it's not for
yeah,
everybody. Like
yeah. I guess I should say that. That
there's no
you know
one
that's
tool,
not fair for me
right?
to say that way, but
Yeah. But I do think that like that was one of the first things when I started treatment for PTSD was like, well, you can get this medication's good, this one's good, this one's good. And I really recommend you go to the doctor and you talk to him about this. And they wanted to just give me like three or four things.
yeah,
And then you start looking at them and you're like, well, what are the side effects? And you start, and for me, it just didn't work. Other people I've known that they some of them just hit the right medicine with the right dose right out of the gate and they're good to go.
yeah,
Others took them a while. Others were like me where they're just like, yeah, no. Or they started them and I didn't want anything that I couldn't just stop taking.
yeah,
I didn't want to have to wean off of something or anything like that. And so for me, it wasn't the answer, but for a lot of people it is. And it works for them, but I think it's also in conjunction with the other things that we've talked about, those other
yeah,
therapeutic things, activities that you enjoy, um, therapy, any number of treatments.
yeah. I think you can carry it too far too. So I have a pretty good friend that's a wounded vet. He stepped on an IED. Uh, he was supposed to well, he was supposed to die to start with, and then they said he'd be a quadriplegic. Um, and honestly, the military didn't do any favors. He ended up having to. He went to a college in California, and they had some experimental program they helped him with, and he ended up just losing a leg, just.
Yeah,
Um, but he deals with a lot of underlining PTSD and some other issues a lot, and and he ended up. I don't think he does any medication now. I wish he'd figure something out. I know he self medicates a lot, which is not the answer.
nope,
Uh,
not at all. And I've been there.
yeah, and he. I mean, I understand why. We had a conversation. He finally opened up to me one night, and he says just the demons are there if he doesn't, and
Mhm.
it's just not safe for his family. He says if he doesn't self medicate, which I totally get. Like in a way, I'll never be able to understand exactly what he's going through. I don't
Mhm.
pretend to understand what he's going through, but I can sympathize with if that's how he's feels like he can keep the demons away in
Mhm.
his words. That then I get it. But I wish that he could see that there were maybe some safer ways long term
Yeah,
from
and
that.
there's
So I don't know if there's you just said that you've dealt been down that road before. There might be some other folks that have been down that way before or that way now. I hope you guys realize that long term is not safe. It's not safe
no,
at all.
no, it's not. And there's so many just really good treatment options out there now that especially like some of the emerging stuff that
Yeah.
they're doing studies on right now that have just been remarkable for people. There's a guy that I'm going to have on in July who has done some stuff with some of the trials and just had really remarkable life changes because of it. And
I
I've
was
experienced that too.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, um, and he had a neurologist on, and it was, man, it was crazy. They started talking about some of the psychedelic treatments and
Hmm.
stuff that, um, I mean, I don't, you can think one way or the other, but the results that this particular individual had with the psychedelic, medical dosage, not just a trip,
Hmm.
it helped him a lot. And so the neurologist went into why some of those psychedelic treatments work, and some of the other things that are natural out there,
Hmm.
not man made. That things that are made in nature that are
Hmm.
pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And it's too bad that some of those, I think sometimes the drug companies kind of say, no, we don't want that stuff to come out. You have to take this medicine that was made in the lab.
yeah. And there is a lot of stuff out there that I'm finding, um, like plant medicine wise, that people have had, and people have come on here and talked about plant medicine and what they've
Yeah.
done, and just remarkable experiences. And it is kind of an interesting culture as far as like it being kind of underground, because it's not necessarily a legal thing. Some people travel out of the country.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even
That is
the
true.
psychedelics that they are allowing,
Some
clinical
ayahuasca and
trials,
some
yep,
mad honey. And
yeah,
yeah, that
um,
stuff intrigues me. I don't know if I'll ever try it, but that stuff absolutely intrigues me. I think I, I kind of think that if there's an element from the body, there's probably a natural remedy for it. I tend to think that there's probably something that naturally can be fixed
yeah,
without man-made medicines.
yeah. And when you think about it, I mean, if it comes from nature, I mean, I mean, that God created that,
Yeah,
or deity, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, whatever your belief. I mean, that's like in its purest form. And I do truly believe that, like, regardless of your faith, everybody knows that the earth was created for a purpose to sustain life.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
why we're
I
on it, because it sustains life. So we should have everything that we need. We just haven't
yeah.
necessarily discovered it yet. Or if we
Or
have,
it's
it
being
has not
or it's
become
being
accepted.
repressed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's some great stuff out there in the psychedelic world for treatment. And I've been fortunate enough to have have experienced treatments with ketamine, and I've talked about that on here multiple
yeah,
times. And it was life changing for me, and I can't say enough good things about it. And I think that other people are having those experiences with a lot of other things like the ayahuasca and MDMA and
yeah,
psilocybin. And it's just a matter of finding the right treatment for you, because for some people it literally is just hanging out in a chair in an office talking to a therapist for a few months, and other people need something more. And whatever that
yeah.
is,
It
there's
it
so
is
many choices.
individual, right?
Mhm.
It's not a there's not a one size fits all.
Yep. And that's what it's all about, is that we we have this toolbox and we filled it with all these tools, but not any one of them is right for everyone, but one
Yeah,
of them is right for somebody.
yeah, yeah. I don't disagree.
Yeah. So there's a lot of exciting stuff with that. And um I'm really intrigued with a lot of the plant medicine stuff. I just have not felt like the opportunities that have come my way to experience plant medicine, that the timing was right.
Yeah,
Um and like some of it too, like to say I'm taking a trip to the Amazon, which I was invited to do. It definitely was a timing issue, but then like in my mind that created a whole lot of concern. Like, okay, I'm going to go to a foreign country
yeah,
and do some psychedelics. And granted, like it's okay there; it's not illegal. But I'm in the rainforest. Like, you don't get off the path in the rainforest, because that's how people disappear forever. And like,
right.
so there was just all these things that were where I just like mentally and everything else in my life at the time was not set up that, like, okay, this is the time. But I think that there will be a time when it works for me. And I'm very much too, because I'm a proponent of all these things, I want to be able to speak from a place of experience and intelligence. So when different treatment things come up, I try them. I mean, I've become like a huge proponent of breath work. And like a year ago, I'd been like, oh, that's just some hippie shit. But the experiences that I've had with breath work and the things that I've been able to pull out and like work on that I didn't even know were there.
Hmm.
And that's just breathing in a pattern that puts you in that place. So there's all these things out there, and that's been around for, dude, I don't know, thousands of years.
Yeah, has to have been. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
like, kind of like meditation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people have a really good outcomes with meditation,
Hmm.
and I've tried meditation. I'm not obviously not very good at it. I tried it when I was in my 20s, and I could just never get into that state, right? That I just could never get there, and I just get frustrated, and then I finally gave up.
Yep. Yeah, it took me a few months before Brittany really pushed me to like, no, you got to try it. And I was like, it doesn't do nothing for me. And so then once I actually was like, okay, I'm going to put in the effort. Now it's become a part of my daily routine. And
Yeah,
I love it because it's interesting. Like this week I had an experience with meditation where suddenly I realized, like in the middle of meditation, that I had like kind of hit this new place in my meditation where when I started, it was very hard to just not focus on anything and just be in this spot, in this space. And because my brain is like, I don't know, squirrels with lightsabers or something. Who knows? Like it's just firing every which way. And so I have all these thoughts just back and forth, and trying not to focus on any of those was so hard. And now
yeah,
I've kind of gotten to this place where the first few minutes, like, yeah, there's some of that going on. And then I can actually kind of tell when like I'm no longer focusing on the things that I don't want to focus on. And I'm just present in that meditation. And 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 I say focusing, but you're almost not focusing. It's just a different I don't know how to explain it, but the clarity and relaxation that I get from that to start my day, just it works for me now. And I mean
yeah.
that
My
was something that I started like 6 months ago, and at the time I was like, this is dumb. It doesn't work. Doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I kind of have that same squirrel brain where everything was just I think of all things I have to do, and it just everything. And then I think that was part of my problem too. I was just like, I don't have time to this. I could just get things done instead of worrying about it. So
Yeah. And what I learned was that it was, maybe in 10 minutes of meditation, initially I'd spend like 9.5 quieting all those thoughts. And then that's slowly grown to
yeah,
where now it's just the first few minutes I'm quieting all that noise around me and then actually getting into that space. And it's like anything else. It's all a practice. You have to, it just doesn't happen. And I was talking with a friend about this yesterday because he's working on some things, and I was like, man, like you gotta give it a go. I'm like, it sounds like I'm telling you, it wasn't for me. I kept saying that, but um, it took time. But once you kind of get to it, now I don't see myself doing my day without it.
nice.
Occasionally, like I'll have something happen where I get called into work early or some circumstance that prevents me from doing it. And one day, like I'm fine. Day two without it though, I'm like, yeah, we got to get back on course here and be doing these things. So it's just and for some people it's not meditation. Some people it's just any number of things that they do in their morning routine. I mean, I have over the last few years come to love reading in the morning and as just part of my day, just starting it out. And that just kind of sets my tone for the day.
Yeah, my mornings are usually full of swearing. That's
Yeah. Whatever works for you, Steve.
you think I'm joking? That's what's funny. Is no, you
I
think of all the
don't.
stuff
I
I
don't.
didn't get done the day before. Is like, damn it, and that list keeps growing. That's what's frustrating.
Yeah, but we deal with those things the best we can, and really, like for me, once I came to the understanding that my to-do list was never going to be completely finished, that made
Yeah.
it a lot easier. That I'm just like I keep checking stuff off, and I try to check off as much as I can.
It's
But
like a living document is all it is.
yeah, yeah, it's in you know, unfortunately, the some of that to-do list isn't work related, but it almost should be, because it's like job security. You're never going to run out of something to do.
Yeah.
You can ignore it, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, so is there anything else that you want to add, Steve, that you'd want to say to anybody who's dealing with any struggles in life?
Well, when it comes to at least dealing with the loss of a loved one, I wouldn't say that it gets easier, because it really doesn't get easier. Their memories are never going to go away. At least I hope not. But somehow you learn to cope with it a little bit better day by day. Um, you don't want to lose those memories, obviously, but I think it helps to think about the good times, that happy memories, that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think when it comes, if you're feeling down about other things, maybe not even a loss of your loved one, I think it is important to like we talk about, breaking your focus, right?
Mm.
Change what you're doing. If you can find a hobby, or if you can just step away, go for a drive, something, just pick up art. I don't Pick up something just to
Yeah.
change what you're focusing on, so you're not always seeing the same thing. Sometimes my wife, I get kind of frustrated with her sometimes, because she'll be grumpy about something, and I'll tell her, you just need to look at the bright side of things. Like, if all you're looking at is a negative stuff, that's all you're ever going to see is negative. Start looking at positive stuff, and you'll see more. And I think it kind of carries on with if you're dealing with pain, stop
Mhm.
looking at the pain you're having, and start looking for things to bring light and joy back in, because you'll find it. You will
Yep.
find it.
You find what you're
It may not
looking
be
for.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're always going to go where you're looking. Have you ever snowmobiled before, or skied?
I haven't snowmobiled. I've skied quite a bit though.
So, have you ever skied through the trees?
Yep. If you look at the tree, you're gonna hit it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. If you're looking at the obstacle, you're going to hit that obstacle. But if you're looking at the solution, or looking for the solution, you'll find it.
Yep.
Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, but it's there.
Hmm.
Um, I, I've never been scared of an adventure, even if it doesn't turn out the way I want it to. Uh, like this plastic thing, it might not turn out like I want it to. It might have been a huge waste of time, but I'd rather know that I tried it and I
Hmm.
failed at it, than wonder what would have happened, if I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I'd rather just try it.
Yeah.
And like I say, if you're struggling with something, try to find something to make you happy. Look for it, because you'll find it. It's
Mhm.
there. Even if it's a dog, man, something. It's
Yep.
there.
Yep.
There's always a
Absolutely.
light.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. That's that's exactly it. I think you nailed it. So appreciate that. And Steve, thank you for coming on. It's been great catching
Yeah,
up with you. It's been too long.
it's been a
Um,
while.
and yeah, we're gonna talk about that whole doing some weekend adventure thing. I think
Dude,
that's
I'm
a I
absolutely
think it's a great
down.
idea. There's a lot of people that connections that you have and I have, and just get a
Yeah,
bunch of guys out and
I found out my neighbor is like this, super into like survival, and he's been
nice.
like all over classes all over the country. Like, no idea, and he's my neighbor, so I need to
Nice.
start utilizing him. He would be fun to have up there to set up shelters and
Yeah.
make our own fires and all that like primitive stuff. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a good time. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that some more and we'll put something together. So
Heck
if you
yeah,
guys are
be awesome.
interested in it, reach out. We'll put something together. We'll get it going, and we'll go be men out in the
Yeah,
woods.
chances are it'll be somewhere in, like, location wise, would probably be southeastern Idaho,
Yeah.
northeastern Utah.
Yeah. But
Maybe,
what better place to do it?
yeah, within that couple 100-mile radius.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
There's
Yeah.
plenty to
So
do. Like, there's plenty of places to see.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are interested, reach out. We'll put something together. And Thanks, guys, for checking into this week's episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Thanks, Steve, for coming on. I appreciate you and had
No,
a
I
great
appreciate you
conversation.
for having me come on.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you letting me come on.
yeah, anytime. Happy to have you on again. And if you guys see this, if you found value in it, share it with somebody. Be sure to review the podcast, give us 5 stars, share it, like, follow, all that stuff. It helps us get
They
the
had
message out
better.
to more people. So let's do it, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next week for another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Love y'all. God bless.